Fantastic. Thank you for the intro, Brian. So, as Brian kind of hinted, even though the title of this talk is the Affordances of Quality, actually its original title was just Building in Quality. It's probably a good thing I changed it because that's almost the exact same title as one of our keynotes tomorrow. So it would be very awkward if we both had the same title. But it is still about building in quality. So I searched for this phrase, build in quality, a little while ago, and I found almost 2 billion results. So it's a fairly popular idea. I think we broadly agree that building in quality is a good thing that we should do. And I'm not going to go down these 2 billion results and kind of tell you which of these are good articles and which of these are bad articles. There's lots of good advice in here. There's lots of good articles and posts and talks and papers on how to build in quality. But what I want to try and look at is what ties them together. What's the common thread here when we say building in quality? But I do also kind of have an ulterior motive here. So I kind of really just want to do a talk about doors. I really like doors. I'm fascinated by doors as a concept. So like when I'm walking around town, I sometimes stop and take pictures of doors because I think they're interesting. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to be friends with me, it's just the worst. So these doors here, I think these are some of my favorite doors. So I want to ask everyone a question. You can answer this in the chat if you would like. If you were walking towards these doors, would you push or would you pull? You've already got one push there. Very good. Push, push, push. I see loads of pushes coming through, right? You're all correct. You're all 100% correct. You would push on these doors. And you all got the correct answer, even though there's no sign on here that says push. How did you figure that out? So there are elements of the design here that help you understand how you can interact with this door. So there's these little metal plates here, right? They're almost exactly at hand level. If you kind of hold your arm out, hold your hand out, and they're flat, right? So they match up with your hand as you're walking towards the door, right? So you can easily push on them. You've also got these kind of metal bars at the bottom. These are called kick plates. So if you're holding something in your hands, you can just kind of kick the door open. It's metal, so it shows you can clearly kick it, no problem there. See, this is why I like these doors. These are well-designed doors. I saw a couple of comments in the chat there. These are brilliant design, right? What makes these doors good was explored by Don Norman in the book, The Design of Everyday Things. And he describes the elements of these particular elements of design that kind of help us understand how we can interact with systems as affordances. Says that affordances determine what actions are possible. So we would say that the metal plates on this door afford pushing. They do not afford pulling. There's no way you can pull on this door. This door has affordances for pushing. This door affords pushing. That's what makes this such a well-designed door. How about this door? Push or pull? Same question. Answers in the chat if you want to. So I've got pull. We've got a few pulls there. Is anyone going to be brave and go for push? When I've asked this before, we had a couple of people here on push, right? Okay. So usually when I ask this in a crowd, I get about 50-50, right? The answer was actually pull. So for those of you who said push, you would have walked into it. It would be very funny for everyone watching. But it wouldn't have been your fault. See, when you walk towards these doors, you hold your hand out, you grab the handle. It affords pulling and pushing. You can do both. Or it affords both actions, but it only allows one. Right? So there's a mismatch between what the design says to you and what you can actually do with this door. And we call these Norman doors after Don Norman from this from the book, The Design of Everyday Things. When you notice, when you're aware of this idea of affordances, you see them everywhere, right? Scissors have affordances, right? You've got these two slots in scissors, right? You've got the big slot and you've got the little slot. You've got 4 fingers and you've got a thumb, right? They only afford being held in a particular way. This is easy. This is impossible. They do not afford being held in that way. And this is why you've never found scissors with instruction manuals, right? Because they're so intuitive to use, because they have affordances that communicate how you work with them. And again, when you recognize this idea of affordances, you see them everywhere, right? My mug here affords being held in a particular way. But affordances aren't just for good things. There are affordances for, sometimes systems can afford bad behavior as well, negative things. A great example of this is flat surfaces, right? So think about flat surfaces. Flat surfaces afford having things put on them. So when I drink from my cup, I naturally put it down on a flat surface because it's stable, it fits there, it sits, it doesn't move around. It's great. Flat surfaces afford having stuff put on them. And that's why your desk is messy, because your desk affords having stuff put on it, which is why you pile stuff up on it. Now, we've been talking about affordances for design systems, right? For physical systems, so everyday things, actually, that's the name of the book. But there are affordances in our ways of working, in our processes as well. And I think about the affordances in this, right? Our kind of project board. Maybe it's a Kanban board, maybe a Scrum board. And I'm willing to bet most people either do or have worked with this with a board that looks something like this, right? So you've got a ready for dev column. People pull work from this. They work on it in the development column. Then it goes to a QA phase, a QA column, and then ultimately it's marked as done. Now, I'm assuming you probably also have extra stuff, right? Maybe you include the analysis column where you actually work with stakeholders, BAs, POs to flesh out the stories. Maybe you have some showcase, some stakeholder sign-off. I would hope you do. But very broadly, I assume you have a system that looks something like this. Which means on an average week, your board probably looks something like this, right? You've got a few stories in development, a couple of developer pairs working on each story. And then something interesting happens. All these developers are doing absolutely the right thing. They're building in quality, right? They're thinking about edge cases. They're thinking about what can go wrong. They're thinking about test cases. They're automating testing. They're pairing, right? Pairing is a fantastic way of building in quality. You get two sets of eyes on every line of code that you write. They care deeply about quality. They are doing everything right. They are building in quality. And then they find a test case that's just really, really difficult, really, really painful to automate, really, really difficult to set up the test data for. And then they kind of look over to the right and they see, well, there's a QA column there, right? We could just kind of, we're doing a good job, like we're doing the best we can, but if we miss something, we've got this QA column there as kind of a safety net, right? To kind of catch things if we screw up. So they say, hey, okay, we're going to leave a little note on the card and we'll just kind of push this story over into QA. And, the QA will deal with that other bit of quality that we kind of missed. The QA column here acts as a flat surface. It's a flat surface on which we can kind of push quality. As long as we have this QA column, there's someone else to take care of quality just a little bit later, right? Even though we understand we should be building in quality, we should all be taking responsibility for it, there's still that QA column, right? And then the developer pair, they have another choice, right? Do they go and work in the QA column, right? Because they could, there's a QA over there, right? They could work with the QA, they could share knowledge and skills and context, and they could work in this QA column to get this story done. Or they could pick up a story from Ready for Dev and, kick off a new story. And they're kind of looking over, well, there is a QA over in the QA column, right? And, that's kind of where the QAs live, right? QA column, QAs, right? And we're the developers and we live in the developer column, right? So, let's just assign the QA, right? That makes sense. It's sort of nominative determinism here, right? And once again, we've pushed quality to someone else, right? We said, yes, we understand we should all be taking responsibility for quality. Yes, we should all be building in quality. But there is that column over there, and there is that QA over there, so they can deal with that. And the interesting thing about this story is every single person had the best of intentions. Every single person understood what they should be doing. Every single person understood the importance of building in quality. It wasn't the people who were at fault here. It was the system. Just like in real life, it's not the people that are the problem. It's the borders we put between them. So let's get rid of the border. Let's get rid of the QA column. What does this system look like now? What does this say to you as you walk into the room and look at this wall? It says, there's nowhere that you can push quality. If you're going to build quality, if you're going to be doing testing, if you're going to care about quality, it needs to happen in development. It needs to be something that everyone does together. There also isn't a QA column where the QAs live. QAs, testers, developers need to work together. They need to collaborate. You need to be taking every opportunity you can to work together, to pair, to share knowledge, to share context and skills. This sends a very different message. This system affords building in quality because it's the only way you can work. There is no way to push quality later. So I think of getting rid of the QA column as building an affordance for quality. It changes the system, so the only way to interact with it is to build in quality. The second affordance I want to talk about is something I first sort of started really thinking about a few years ago. I was at a conference with Daniel Terhorst North, and you might know him. This is a former thought worker and inventor of BDD, so probably fairly famous around here. And we're in a conversation. He just kind of mentioned offhand, a testable system is a well-designed system, which I thought was just a fascinating sentence to say, right? Because testability, this is something you can do whole talks about. This is a whole topic in and of itself that lots of people can kind of describe. I think a lot of people would struggle to really get deep on. And nobody agrees on what a well-designed system is, right? So this is an incredibly controversial topic. And he just said, yeah, these two are just exactly the same. This is the same topic entirely. And this thought kind of burrowed its way in my head, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And I agree. I've come to the conclusion that I very much agree with this statement. I think about a testable system. I think a testable system should be modular. We should be able to take components of our system, whether it's functions, methods, classes, even entire services, and I should be able to test them in isolation from the others. I should be able to take out little components. I should be able to stub out mock and stub out dependencies. I should be able to test them in isolation with confidence, right? Without needing to set up all of its little dependencies. Without modularity, every unit test starts to look a lot like an integration test. I need to start touching this component, that component, and it starts to get very, very awkward. Modularity is what enables unit tests. Katie Fox gave a great talk about unit tests earlier today, and modularity is what enables us to rely on them. It's what enables this kind of broad base of the test pyramid. And I'm also going to say that a well-designed system is modular. A modular system is one where I can swap out components. It's one where I can refactor with confidence. If I don't like one particular function, I can just refactor it. And those tests are still going to run against it. Those tests are going to give me confidence that I didn't break anything. I should be able to swap out functions, methods, libraries, classes, even entire services. Modularity enables evolution of our systems. It enables us to change things. So a testable system and a well-designed system, I think, are both going to be modular. think a testable system is also going to be observable. I should be able to understand what's going on inside the system. I should be able to verify if my changes actually had the effect that I wanted. If I have a test to create an account, right? Pretty standard test, right? Maybe you do this at the start of many of your tests. Create account. If the only way I can verify whether or not that account was successfully created was to wait for an email to be sent via a third-party system, and then read that system, and then read that email from an email server somewhere, that system isn't really very testable. That system isn't really observable. What I want is to be able to look inside the system. What I want is to be able to understand the internals of my system. This helps me write tests. Expected actual, assert that actual is equal to expected. If I can't verify, if I can't see the actual, it's not a very testable system. It's not an observable system. And observability, I think, is also really important for a well-designed system. It's an operational concern. When I'm running a system, observability is what allows me to troubleshoot problems. It's what allows me to figure out if something broke or if something went wrong. It allows me to figure out why and fix things. It also allows me as a developer to get fast feedback, understand whether or not, again, the change I made to the system had the effect that I wanted. Observability is key in both of these cases. And finally, and I hope I'm not saying anything too controversial here, but I think a testable system should be simple. It should be something I can fit in my head, something I can understand. I worked with a business process flow diagram once with a former client, and it was so big that we actually needed an industrial printer to print it out. So we only really printed it out like twice a year. But that system was not simple. And that system was not testable. It was almost impossible to understand what a test should do if you had to look at the giant business process flow diagram. Testable system should be simple so I can test, so I can understand what I am testing. And again, hopefully not too controversially here, but I think a well-designed system should be simple as well. I should be able to look at the system and understand what's going on. I should be able to look at the system and understand if something's going wrong. I should be able to fit the system in my head. I like this. I like a KPI of developer onboarding speed. How quickly can you onboard a new developer? How quickly can they understand the system and start meaningfully contributing? Simplicity aids that. So think about, I wonder if any of you have ever heard a phrase like this, this test is going to take a long time to write. Or this test maybe it'll take a long time to run, right? Or it'll be really flaky. It's going to fail half the time. Or maybe it's just going to be really difficult to set up this test data, right? I wonder if any of you heard these phrases from people before. Bonus points if you've heard them all from like the same person on the same project. But when I hear these, it makes me sad because there's nothing fundamental about software or testing that makes these statements true. What I hear when someone says these things to me, what I hear is that this system is not testable. What I hear is that this system lacks affordances for testing. And that's why I've put focusing on testability as I think the second affordance today, because I think that it sounds incredibly basic to say it, but making something easier makes people more likely to do it. Stop shouting about tests. Stop saying do more tests. Start making it easier to do the tests. Start making it easier to write and to run those tests. A focus on testability does that. A focus on testability creates an affordance for testing. And the final affordance I want to talk about today is I'm going to start with a little anecdote. Just, I hope you do bear with me here. So it was a little bit earlier in my career. I was working in a very big organization, in a very big department, looking after a very big product. Easily over 100 people working on this product, split into easily over a dozen teams. And one day, the head of this product walked into the room. Full disclosure, he didn't have a crown. It's just so you can sort of distinguish him on the screen. But he walked into the room and he sort of clapped his hands and called everyone out for sort of a short notice all hands meeting. So all the teams came out, stood up, and the head of the department said, look, our competitors just released the latest version of their software, the software that competes directly with us, right? This is a bad thing for us, right? Can we release? It was a really, really simple question. He stood in front of basically the entire department, the entire product team, and said, can we release? And everyone in the room sort of looked awkwardly at each other, particularly that the team leads. They all kind of looked at each other. And then one of them sort of stood up and said, no, you actually can't. And to his credit, the head of the head guy, the guy with the crown there, he wasn't angry. He was just curious. He wanted to understand why. He said, but hang on. I've seen you demo new features, right? You had a showcase last week. I saw the features. They were working. They were tested. Why can't we release that? And the team lead explained. They said, well, look, we were working on our development branches, right? So we have a feature branch. And we've all been working for, a couple of months on these branches, right? To help keep us isolated from the other teams, right? So we don't constantly step on each other's toes. And we demoed the latest feature to you on the development branch, on this feature branch. So before we can release, what we need to do is we need to integrate. We need to bring all these branches together. We need to do a big merge. And that can take a while because, these branches have been going on for a couple of months now. And after that, then we can do our systems testing, right? Because the systems testing is about testing the system as a whole. It doesn't really make sense to test to do full systems testing on just one feature branch. So we can only really do systems testing after integration. Same with installation testing. The product we were building was middleware at this time, and we supported dozens and dozens of platforms. So we needed to make sure it worked on all of these platforms. Again, something that only really makes sense once we've integrated everything together, right? Same with load testing. Load testing, that takes a long time, so we've got to invest really. So it doesn't make sense to do it on every single team every single week. So we do it, only after we've integrated, only when we're coming up to release. And there's dozens of other little things we need to do. Really boring things like license updates, right? We had to go into the license file and change the year on the license text, right? Really, really boring, not complicated, doesn't take a long time, but it's little things like that add up. And then after we've done all of that, then we can release. This whole process, this can take weeks, easily upwards of a month. I think about that a lot because that was my first kind of big release, actually, in my career. And I think back to the most recent big release that I did, and it was incredibly boring. Our PO, who was sort of sitting next to us at the time, just sort of looked up and said, "Hey, I've written the press release. Can we release now?" And one of the team members said, "Yeah, sure." So we toggled the feature flag, pressed the deploy button. I think we just did a git push, and we did all of these things. Right? We integrated. We did our systems testing, our load testing, our security testing. We ran all of our tests, and the whole process, this whole thing, took, I think at the time it was about 15 minutes. I think we got it down a little bit, but at the time it was about 15 minutes. And that was one of about 20 deploys that day. It was a very boring release. I think about the differences between those two releases, right? One which took multiple months and was a big, long, stressful process, and one which was an incredibly simple, boring process. Very, very fast. I think some of you probably figured this out, but the difference here is continuous delivery. The second team was doing continuous delivery. The formal definition of continuous delivery is something like writing software in such a way that you can always release to users, that you can always deliver software that's in a continuously deliverable state. But I like Dave Farley's definition. He gives this kind of informal definition, which I prefer. He says, continuous delivery makes releasing a business decision. That's all it is, right? Think about that first story. The manager walked into the room. They said, "Can we release?" And the team said, "No. No, you can't. We need to do some stuff before you can release." Releasing was a technical decision. Continuous delivery makes it a business decision. When the question is, can we release? The answer is always yes. That's the essence of continuous delivery. And there's a lot of things that need to go into this to make this work. First of all, and probably most obviously, you need a repeatable, reliable release process. You need to really, really be able to trust your release process. You should be able to press a button and have the same thing happen reliably, which means you need to automate almost every part of your release process. And this is always a tense one here. I like to really, really focus on this word almost, right? It doesn't mean we get rid of manual work. It doesn't mean we get rid of manual testing, of exploratory testing. It means in the release process, we get rid of every manual step that we can. It means we automate everything that is possible. Almost everything is the key word there. There is still space for manual and exploratory testing. We can talk a bit about that later if you're interested. But we also need continuous integration. This is that issue with branches that I talked about earlier. We can't be releasing, we can't be doing all of our work on a feature branch. We need to be pushing to our mainline branch all the time. So we're getting meaningful feedback on integrated code. If we're doing our integration months in the future, we are delaying pain. Like that merge hell, that merge pain, that will happen. We're just delaying it. So bring it forward. This is another thing we need to do. Bring the pain forward. If something hurts, if something's difficult, if something makes you go, "Oh, I don't want to do that," do it more often. Do it more often so you get better at it. Do it more often so you develop a process for it. Do it more often so you automate bits of it. Bring the pain forward. You also need the team to take responsibility for delivery. And this is a mindset shift. The team isn't responsible for writing code. They're not even responsible for finishing features. They're responsible for delivering products, responsible for delivering software, delivering value to users. That is a subtle but an incredibly important mindset shift. It means that done needs to mean released. I don't care how many tests you wrote. I don't care how many tests you've run against it, automated, manual, or whatever. If it's sitting on a feature branch or sitting in a staging environment, it's not done. It's only done when it's in front of users. Done means released. And finally, you need to build in quality. If every single commit could go to production, you can't push quality until later because there's no later. You need to build in quality. These are the section headings from the first chapter of the continuous delivery book, where he says, and they say, there's lots of things that go into continuous delivery, but these are non-negotiable. These are absolutely necessary, absolutely required. And this makes me think about a great quote from the excellent Mary Poppendick. She said, very simply, the only way to go safely is to go fast. The only way to go safely is to go fast. Think about this, right? There's really only 4 options here, right? You can go slow or fast, safe or unsafe, right? So think about this, slow and unsafe. You release once a year and you don't care about quality. You just throw out any software you want, no testing, no care about quality. That's a terrible idea. Like, don't do that. I don't know anyone who does that because they're all out of business now. But this one's interesting, right? Fast, but unsafe, right? Just keep releasing features, but don't really care about quality. That can work for a little bit, for like a few days, for a few weeks, if you're very, very lucky. And then that quality catches up with you. Then that tech debt catches up with you. This is not sustainable. It's fun for a little bit, but it really is not sustainable. Then, of course, we have kind of the safe and slow space, right? This is, safe and slow. They kind of go together in our heads, right? You release once a year and you put lots and lots of effort into all of your releases, right? You really, really care about quality. Lots and lots of testing for every release. I would argue that this safety is an illusion. You're tricking yourself. If you release once a year, you are fundamentally not very good at releasing. You just don't have that much practice. Think about the things you do once a week versus the things you do once a year. Once a week, you go out shopping, right? You go for groceries. You're really good at that. You can close your eyes, milk, bread. You can do that with your eyes closed because you have all this practice at it. Think about the things you do once a year, though. Taxes, right? I'm very bad at taxes, not because they're fundamentally hard, but because I do them once a year and I have no idea, so I don't have very much practice with them. The only way to go fast is to go safely. The only way to go fast is to get good at it and keep doing it. This is really the only sustainable space. And sometimes I walk into rooms and I say, hey, I'm a QA, I'm a tester, or however I introduce myself these days. And I sometimes get this sort of, people assume that I'm going to start shouting about tests. I'm going to say, hey, do more tests, do more tests. They assume I'm going to push them here. But the first question I always ask is, how frequently do you release? When was the last time you pushed to production? And how do we make that faster? Because the only way to go fast is to go safely. This is the only sustainable space. And that's why I think of continuous delivery as an affordance for quality. When you focus on continuous delivery, you build a system that only works if you build in quality. The only way to interact with this system is to build quality in at every step. And those are the affordances. This is kind of the theme of my career, I think, is I started my career as a tester, as someone on the outside shouting about testing. And I said, do more tests, be better at quality. And I don't see that as my job anymore. I see it as my job to help teams get better at delivering quality. I see it as my job to make it easier for teams to deliver quality. I see it as my job to build affordances for quality, build systems where the only way to interact with them is to build quality. So that's affordances of quality. Thank you very much.
Really good, Steve. Thank you. Absolutely.
Lovely.
If you guys have questions, fire them in the chat or in the I don't see the Q&A section here, so I think the chat is the one. Nicely done. I got a question for you, Steve.
Go for it.
In some of the cloud services and medical stuff that I've worked with, the systems, this kind of gets into your controversial topic. The very system was designed to be configurable nth scale, right? So complexity was the design of it. And so it was meant to be adaptable, saying we can configure it to do a myriad of different things. And that, in a sense, was the feature set. So it became we basically had to decide what we thought the boundaries or the level of complexity we needed to configure. Because at the end of the day, that's the truth of what we're configuring, and then you come up with all these different scenarios. Does that sound like a familiar scenario to you? Where it's what are some of your takeaways on approaching that kind of a solution or system?
Oof, configuration management. Yeah, that is a complicated topic. It could be a whole other talk. These ideas still apply. There's these affordances. So focusing on things like continuous delivery, forces you to build faster feedback cycles, forces you to focus on those feedback cycles. And that is going to be even more useful when you have this incredibly complex system with all this sort of combinatorial complexity of this configuration management that you mentioned. I don't think I have too much to add sort of directly to that topic because it is such a huge one. Please do a talk on that next year. I'd love to hear more about your testing approaches there. But yeah, these approaches are still definitely applicable. And I have worked on things in the medical industry that I can't talk about, unfortunately, that still use these approaches. And then there is sometimes this idea that, these only work if you're a startup or in particular contexts, but you absolutely can apply these ideas to regulated, incredibly complex regulated systems.
Yeah. There's a couple more questions in there. One from Chris and Jessica. They're somewhat related, I think. One was the COTS system. Basically that's the system under test is off the shelf. So where does that quality affordances when that's the target? Yeah.
So I see this. Point about sort of painful data prep for testing, which I suspect is also related to this COTS point. I would look at using a COTS system that is very difficult to set up test data for, or do these other things that are important parts of testing and validating that we're actually delivering quality. I would kind of see that as the opposite of building affordances for quality. You are using systems that make it harder to test. You are building an affordance for not testing and for not really validating all these things. I'm not going to say don't do that. I'm just going to say, think about the choice of your tools in terms of, does this help me deliver quality? Does this help us? Does this help us building quality at every step? And the answer might be no, unfortunately, for some. Right. For some, I'm not saying, again, it is a controversial topic. I'm not saying don't use COTS, but
right. Yeah. And Chris is kind of similar, saying after version 1.0 is built, or basically okay, things have been made in place. We've delivered the system. They listened to none of what you said, and then all of a sudden, okay, this is probably a good idea to explore how do we improve design and testability after we've already reached, round one of the orbit.
Yeah. Most of these are focused more on the process. So you can start to move towards continuous delivery at any point. It doesn't really matter whether or not you've released, or you're just about to release, or you're in the planning stages. Removing the QA column is something you could all do tomorrow if you wanted. That's a process change. And focusing on testability, that is obviously there's technical changes that go into the software there, and same way you would make changes to anything. Strangler pattern's really good. You chip away, right? Don't try to boil the ocean. Go for the quick wins, Yeah.
You know what? On a related note, another company I worked with, we actually solved that by going after some of the non-functional requirements first. For instance, one of the non-functional requirements was this had to be Microsoft software based or something because of partnership. And we certainly learned, there was some limitation that was doing. And so we had to make a architectural non-functional requirement to broaden, and then hone in on some of the testability and other stuff by making that simple, not simple, but non-functional. And some of the other tenets in there as well helped us get with Unity to, making the system less complex and, easier to sustain quality on. By kind of ironic in hindsight, but I bring that up because it was surprising how effective it was.
Yeah. I've definitely been in teams where we've made cases for investing non-trivial amounts of team time into just improving testability, and that's so for some people that's difficult to understand. What does testability have to do with value that I'm delivering to users? But it is something which pays off in the long run, and it's worthwhile doing. Building those affordances is things that I think it's going to break even a lot sooner than you think. Is one of my
Or building production metrics to feed back into the quality process. Just that part alone definitely feeds into what you're saying. And it is an expensive endeavor, but over the long term, more often than not, it adds value-based testing quality versus a cost center.
There's an excellent article on martinfowler.com. I think it's the cost of what is the cost of delivering quality software? Kind of exploring exactly that point of, it's actually cheaper to deliver quality software in the long run. Once you've made those investments, you can deliver a lot faster. It is something which pays for itself and sustains itself. So yeah,
got it.